Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to kick off my Game of Thrones Season 3 episode reviews right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly. And as always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's Game of Thrones episode review. And this is my review of the Season 3 premiere. Now, general thoughts on this week's episode. I was actually very disappointed with the Season 3 premiere. And that's because I do not believe that it has held up in comparison to its previous two predecessors. What I mean is this. There were a couple of things with this episode that I felt did not mesh well. And I felt that these were all things that both the series premiere and the Season 2 premiere did better. So, based off of that assessment, I feel like this premiere is the weakest amongst all three seasons. And these are some of the things I'm talking about. First off are the continuity errors. And this is what I mean. Season 2 did a really good job at setting up their time skip. You know, the elapsement of time that has taken place since the end of Season 1 and the beginning of Season 2. And they did a pretty good job at that because when we were introduced back with all the characters at the beginning of Season 2, we were flung right into where they were at that moment in time. They caught us up with everything that was going on, and they had covered so much ground in such a short amount of time that we were able to immerse ourselves in how the conflict had evolved over that time lapse. Season 3, however, they didn't set that up properly, in my opinion, and this is what I mean. The pre-credit scene when Sam is, when Sam gets attacked by the White Walker, right? That, you can arguably say that took place right after the end of Season 2. Right after. And then we get the opening credits, and then we have Jon arriving at Mance Rayder's village, right? But at the end of Season 2, Jon and the party he was traveling with, they were right at the village. They were up on the mountaintop. Wouldn't have taken them more than maybe an hour or two to get down to the village. So what I'm saying is this. Those two scenes, you can argue, take place right after the end of Season 2. But then by the time we get down south, it seems like a couple of weeks or so might have passed. And this is what I mean. Tyrion's scar is healed. Robb has made it to Harrenhal. What else has happened? And then Dany's managed to leave Qarth, and she's arrived at the next city on a ship. So what I'm saying is this. How much time has actually passed for all three of those things to take place when the two scenes up north seem like they happened right after the Season 2 finale? And then also take in consideration this. Davos was shipwrecked, right? Now, I know that it is possible to survive for some time after being shipwrecked, but I don't think Davos would have been there very long. So, once again, how much time has actually elapsed since Season 2 ended? And that's the problem I'm talking about. There's continuity errors there. Season 2 did not have that problem. They were able to do their time skip relatively well. Another problem I had with this episode was the fact that not much ground was covered. Whatever time skip did occur, however much time did pass, it didn't seem like anything really changed. Nothing changed since the end of Season 2. Not a damn thing. With the exceptions of Jon and Dany. But everything else that was going on in Westeros more or less remained the same. So we just picked this thing up like like it was any other day. And see, and that's always something that bothers me whenever I'm either watching something or reading a story or something like that, especially when it's the beginning. Writing 101. One of a good rule of thumb whenever you start a story is, why this day? What is it about this day? What is it about the point in which you're beginning your story? Why? What is so special about it? Seasons 1 and 2 did a good job at answering those questions. Season 3 did not. I felt like this was just any other day in Westeros. And that takes me out of it. I can't get engaged in the story when you're trying to put me back at a point that, in all honesty, doesn't matter. That just creates a disconnect for me. So, whew, man. Yeah, and to be honest, because not a lot of ground was covered, I just found this episode boring. You know, this is supposed to be your premiere. This is supposed to, that's another thing. They don't set up anything for this season. You see what I'm saying? Seasons 1 and 2 premieres did a really good job at laying the groundwork for everything they were going to build upon for that season. And season 2, I thought, did a really great job of that, because you had Tyrion showing up to be Hand of King's Landing. You had the different factions that were succeeding from Joffrey's rule. You know, the Baratheon brothers. That's when we got the first whiff of Theon actually going to Robb and like, yo, we need to enlist the help of my dad. And Robb sending Catelyn to go make these treaties and whatnot. Arya and her party when they're on the King's Road for the Night's Watch. Jon and the Night's Watch when they get to Craster's place. Dany when she's in the Red Waste and she sends out her riders to go and find nearby cities. All of those things were set up in the season 2 premiere, and each one was a point that they were able to build on top of throughout that season. What did this one set up, with the exception of Jon and Dany and Tyrion? With the exception of those 3 characters, what did they actually set up? So, all those reasons I just listed are all the reasons why I found this episode to be disappointing in my book. Once again, felt like it, when you compare this premiere to the ones of the previous 2 seasons, I don't think it holds up to either one. Don't think it holds up at all. Now, few things I want to mention before I wrap up this review that I actually did get engaged in. I thought Jon's story was good. I like how his first interaction with Mance Rayder and the few men that Mance has that he had with him at that meeting. I am a little bit skeptical of how Mance could be so open to Jon. You know, I would think that Mance would be a bit more skeptical of him, but I'm getting the feeling that maybe Mance might see Jon as a kindred spirit, because Jon is pretty much doing the same thing that Mance did. Mance was a ranger for the Night's Watch, and then he left. And Jon's kind of done the same thing, and on top of that, Jon's managed to kill one of Mance's enemies, that being Qhorin Halfhand. So I think Mance is viewing Jon as a kindred spirit. But is he looking at it from the perspective of, oh, this is a kid just like me? Or is it something more of Commander Mormont will, where it's like, maybe this is a kid I can mentor that may one day succeed me? They don't give off that impression, but I'm just curious to see how that relationship is going to develop. Because to be honest, I don't think we got enough time with either one, with either Jon by himself, with Mance by himself, or with them together. I don't think we got enough of that in this episode to suggest the latter. So, but like I said, I thought it was interesting because it was actually one of the few points in this episode where they were actually progressing the story and not just upholding the status quo. The second thing I thought was interesting was Dany's story. And I like how even though Dany has all these ambitions for what she want to do once she gets to Westeros, she is still upholding that, I don't want to say it's wholesome side of her. You know, here she is trying to buy an army, but she was immediately hesitant toward it because they were slaves. And she's like, I don't want an army of slaves. You know, that's as much of a conqueror as she wants to be. Just the fact that she would make that comment reinforces the personality they've already established for Dany. So I thought that made sense. And I'm glad that they did it because that comment lets us know that that's still the same person. That she didn't just flick a switch and all of a sudden she's someone we don't recognize. She's still Dany. And I'm glad that they actually have her looking for an army now rather than trying to sail to Westeros and find one in the Seven Kingdoms. Because the thing is, Dany has her dragons. Okay, fine, Dany. But she doesn't really have any muscle. Because let's face it, the way those dragons are only the size of dogs. Anyone with half an army could still kill her and her dragons. So, yeah, Dany kind of has to muscle up, if you will. She has to acquire an army of her own so that when she does finally make it to Westeros, she either A, poses as a threat, or B, well, okay, if she poses as a threat, then of course she's going to get met with hostility. Why? Because you're bringing an army into the Seven Kingdoms. We don't know you. We don't recognize you. It's an enemy horde. That's number one. But number two, if she wants to find any legitimate allies in Westeros, then she has to let her allies know that if they take her side, it's going to be worth the fight. And if she doesn't have an army of her own, no one's going to take her seriously. So that does make sense. But honestly, though, man, the scene when the guy cuts off the other dude's nipple, I'm like, what point does this serve? Why? So we just know that these are like hard, machine-like men who don't feel anything? Okay, could you not have exhibit that to us through dialogue? I mean, ugh. Oh, and then the thing with the little scorpion and the Dany accused the little girl of being one of the warlocks from Karth. Like, are we still going down this route? Karth is over. We've left that place. Once again, people, what I keep urging, and the thing that keeps annoying me throughout this review and with this episode, I want story progression, not digression. In King's Landing, I got status quo. Tyrion and Tywin's fucking conversation was digression. I thought that character relationship was going to progress somewhere, and it didn't. We went right back to square one. We went further back than we ever had before with them. Stannis, digression. Rob's kind of withheld the status quo too. Nothing really changed there. But, so yeah, the thing about Dany and with the warlocks, I'm like, do we still need to go there? That chapter was closed. Let's move on. I did think it was cool as shit that Sir Barristan found Dany. And, I did think it was cool as shit, though, that Sir Barristan found Dany and, wants to serve her. I think it's cool. Why? Because it provides her with more protection. She now has someone who can train her army. And it provides her with another mentor-esque figure, another father figure, if you will, other than just Jorah. Because to be honest with you, when they revealed last season that Jorah was actually infatuated with Dany, I thought that kind of killed the thing about their relationship that I liked. I would have preferred if Jorah viewed Dany more as a daughter rather than a potential girlfriend. You know, when they mixed that in, they just lost me with that. I was like, no, that doesn't work for me. But with Sir Barristan, maybe then we can get that father-daughter, mentor-pupil type of relationship between them. So here's hoping. And yeah, and I guess the final comment I want to make is talking about what happened with Tyrion, because I did kind of spaz a couple of minutes ago about that, because that thing just annoyed the shit out of me. It honestly feels like they just pressed a reset button on Tywin and Tyrion's relationship, because in season 1 we knew what Tyrion and Tywin's relationship was. Remember when Tyrion was talking to Jon about what all dwarfs are bastards in their father's eyes? Remember that whole thing? We knew what that was. And then when Tyrion showed up at Tywin's camp, and when he fought in the vanguard with the Hills tribe and stuff like that, and then Tywin sending him to King's Landing and serve his hand, and then all throughout season 2, Tyrion did all this stuff, not for himself, but for his family and for King's Landing. I mean, all the stuff Tyrion did in season 2. And then for Tywin to show up and then completely treat Tyrion with this disregard, like completely just ignoring everything Tyrion done. Now, granted, I agree with Tywin's comment about you think I wanted glory and praise every time I did something. I understand that. That makes sense, because pretty much what Tywin is talking about is suck the fuck. Let me not say that. I was going to say suck it the fuck up, but no, that's not what it meant. What Tywin is talking about is, why should you be rewarded for what you're expected to do in the first place? You see what I'm saying? Now, yeah, you can reward somebody for doing something good, but the idea was that that was Tyrion's job from Jump Street. So Tywin's like, why should I award you for doing what I sent you here to do in the first place? But then Tywin started talking about how he wasn't satisfied with the job that Tyrion did. I don't understand that. Tyrion damn near single-handedly saved King's Landing from siege. Because I'm going to put it to you like this. Without Tyrion's plan of how they used the wildfire, Tywin would not have made it in time to save King's Landing. Stannis would have got his troops in the walls, they would have wrecked shit, and then guess what? Guess who would have been trying to fight coming from the outside of King's Landing? Tywin would have, because Stannis would have been in by then. And they would have been able to fight Tywin off from inside King's Landing. So yeah, he actually owes Tyrion a great deal of gratitude, and he just shit on top of him. And I don't understand why. Now, I don't know if this scene was in the books, but I really hope that it wasn't, because like I said, it's kind of retconning all the potential that their relationship could have had. It just wiped the slate clean with it and brought us back to where we were at the beginning of the story. And I think that was the biggest thing that pissed me off about this week's episode, because to me it feels like a waste. There was so many interesting things they could have done with that, and they just threw it all away. I also want to make note though that the thing with Marjorie, I already like how they're setting up this sort of potential conflict that can transpire between Marjorie and Cersei, because I expected that to happen just because, you know, that's Cersei's replacement, and it's going to happen sooner than she wants it to. So I already knew that was going to happen. But I will say though that Marjorie's whole thing with the orphans and all that, I think that's a publicity stunt. I really don't think she does that out of the kindness of her heart or anything like that. I just think all of that is just for press. That's just me, because nobody in this series seems to do anything for legitimate good. That's just the impression I get from the series. No one in this series does anything because it's the right thing to do or because it's legitimately good or good for someone else. They all have selfish motives. That type of thinking that left the show when Ned left, so that's gone now. You'll only find that and you'll barely find that amongst the Starks, because I think the only Starks that really do that now are the little ones, Arya, Bran, and Rickon. Because we've seen Robb be selfish, we've seen Catelyn be selfish, and we've seen Sansa be selfish. So yeah, the children are pretty much the only ones that uphold that now, which I find very ironic, but also very much realistic in that sense. So yeah, so pretty much that's going to do it for my review for this week's episode. Like I said, very underwhelming, very disappointing, and I hope that I hope that this is just a you know, I hope this isn't a pattern. I'm just hoping it's like, well, you know, the series has been good so far, so yeah, they're entitled to a bad episode every now and then. That's what I'm hoping this is. Just a bad day. So yeah, with that being said, what to keep an eye out for later this week? Pretty much I just got, well, it's a new week technically, but I got my Vikings episode review. That's going to be up tomorrow night, and that's going to wrap up this week's reviews. And other than that, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.